So we were talking about your sister Lacey before the break. You guys wrote an incredible book about racist experiences that that you had. It's a collection of stories about racism, and it made me think about Black people and our humor. Why is it that you think Black people possess the unique ability to laugh or make a joke about practically anything, regardless of seriousness?
Um, because we have been through it, and you gotta laugh to keep from going insane. And that observation is exactly why. Remember a million years ago when people were like, "Well, I'd love to hire Black comedians or Black writers. I just can't find any." And I'm like, Black people are the funniest people on the planet, and it's not even close. And it's not because we chose it or we thought it might be fun. It was to literally survive. We have you beat times a million. I'm sorry. So yeah, that always rubbed me the wrong way whenever people were like, "Well, there just aren't any." But I'm like, so sorry. They're the funniest people on the planet.
Well, and especially there's this stereotype or narrative that Black women in particular aren't funny. I'm like, if you got a Black mama, she was funny. Trust me. She didn't always mean to be funny, but she was funny.
My mom was voted class clown, as was I.
What? Carrying a tradition. Look at that. In the book, there are just so many different stories to react to. Was there, well, I guess other than the Disneyland story, but was there any story that you actually wondered, like, is it a good idea to tell this story?
um, is it a good idea to tell the story? No. Well, no. I mean, not for the first
That's a
book.
long well.
Yeah, it is,
Okay.
buddy. It was for the first book. We just had so many stories, so many that we're writing the second book. The second book we done turned in already. So
Wow.
like, but on that second book, we were like, I don't know, man. I don't think we can go in about so and so's racist neighbors because they still live there. You know what I mean? But oh my gosh, the urge, like after the first book came out, the urge to put people on blast was very hard to dodge. Like Lacey's a good human being, so she doesn't feel that way. But I am like, let's ignite these pieces of crap. But I mean, we could try, but the editor's going to be like, you can legally, you cannot do that. Oh, all right.
um, well, one of the funnier ones was the Harriet Tubman story when the lady told her that she
My
looked like.
absolute favorite.
Is that your favorite one that's in there? What's your favorite one?
Harriet Tubman is my favorite story. Listeners, hold on to something. Lacey goes in to a store and pays for something with a check. This is, of course, a million years ago. Lacey has Black history checks, and so she hands the cashier the check, and the cashier looks at the check and goes, "Oh, I didn't know you could get your picture on checks." And the picture is of Harriet Tubman, not a special rendering of her. The picture you're thinking of when you think of Harriet Tubman.
And not
She,
a very young Harriet Tubman either. It's like she's her most Harriet-ish in this picture, right?
she, she has achieved grand Harrietdom, that Harriet Tubman. And she thought that that was Lacey. And I just laughed and laughed and laughed. That's my favorite story. Although I say that about every story, but I do love that one. It's just the most. It sets the tone for the book perfectly.
It
Because
sets the
you,
tone.
yeah, yeah.
What was it? It did. I mean, did you? Was it difficult to convince her to write this? To turn this into something that the public could see.
Absolutely not.
Mm,
Lacey had the reason why it was so easy for us, well, is because we've known each other forever. So we remember all these stories. But Lacey has a journal from every job she's ever had. And when you're at work and you're the only Black person at work, please go get a journal and then write down everything that happens. Because lots of times what will happen is, well, when you want to go to HR, you're going to need to know every last detail. But what will happen more often than not is someone will say a million racist things to you, and then on the 101st time they say something racist, you go, hey, don't talk like that. And then they lose their mind, and then they go to HR and they go, this person's insane. And then when they do that, you'll go, actually, on July 5th, he said this, and on this date, he said that, and on that date, and these are the witnesses, and blah, 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 blah. And that's really how it said, but that's how it had come in handy. So Lacey had, I'm not kidding, a stack of those journals. And so we just went through and chose the ones we liked the most.
Well, did they ever or did she worry at all about, maybe not, I don't think she cares about burning any racist bridges, but did she worry about, what kind of ripple effect that this might have, like, on her life, that people would be like, oh snap, what, I ain't talking to her, this is the lady who's going she's going to wind up in a book that it would be racist, that I'm a racist.
She actually ended up doing the opposite, because once word got out at her job, which of course she has since been fired from, word got out at her job that she was writing a book about all the racist things people have said to her at her jobs. People acted right. So, hey,
so folks, it worked out.
So threaten to write a book to shut your coworkers up. It worked.
Speaking of how you have been able, or how Black people in general are able to maybe not, humor wouldn't be the word I would approach for this, but at least levity. You did a series of monologues for Seth Meyers' show after George Floyd, telling people about your experiences, which was really powerful. And I think what was especially powerful was because I think you're a Black woman, and people never tend to think of Black women facing the level of harassment that you face from police. That added, I think, an extra layer to it. This is not to say that we face that more than Black men. Not to put it in a competitive way, but I think it made people really think that much more deeply about how pervasive this problem was. So how did that come together? You sharing those experiences?
Yeah, during the week after George Floyd's murder, I was like, oh, I want to say something on the show. I'm going to write a sketch, because that's the format we communicate in. So I wrote a sketch, and by the end of the day, I'm not exaggerating, by the end of the day, the tide of the world had changed so much that the sketch was in bad taste. So I threw it out and was like, that's okay, I'm going to do a rant. And then I wrote a rant that night, and I woke up in the morning and the rant was in bad taste. And I was like, my goodness, it was such a overnight reckoning that I was trying to write against the flow of the tide of the world. So I was like, here's something we can do. I have been pulled over. I've been stopped by the cops 7 probably times. And but I've had a billion interactions with the cops, but I've been stopped by the cops, and we can do a story. I can just pick the worst one, and I can just tell it from memory. And they're like, oh, okay. And so we shot it. This was during COVID, so I'm at home shooting it on Zoom, and I just spoke it into the camera, and they said, great. And they opened the show with it. And at this point, these people know me as the silly lady who does a goofy thing on Seth's show for the past, at that point, 6 years. They've known me for 6 years. And when I told them that, the cops looked at me in a completely different way than they've ever seen me. They could not reconcile that with what they thought the cops were. And I think in a lot of cases, it changed. Instead of changing their perception of me, it changed the perception of the cops, which was my goal.